Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news for Wednesday, September 18th. So, yeah, maybe a little bit slower to start today. Once again, I should jump into the news fairly quickly, though last stream was pretty much a mess. Yu-Gi-Oh! Still doing its Yu-Gi-Oh! Thing with login bonuses. I worked on the new version of my macro to open all these news pages, and in the process I actually deleted a bunch of code and failed to make good backups to recover it, so I'm gonna have to recreate it. Although with the new version of the macros, the UI Vision macros based on Selenium is the name of the ID, they're really short. The interface is terrible, so because the interface is terrible, you really don't want to even use 100 lines of code and don't really need to. But yeah, I screwed up, which means my chart is going to potentially be screwed up, and it was already screwed up a little bit because it had sampled when I first set it up several days in a row, which it needs to be more balanced than that, and just have a sample for every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But yeah, have I been doing anything else YouTube related? Now, I'm still very much getting distracted by non-YouTube stuff. Scheduled some YouTube shorts, and I am just debating certainly as to what time do I want to start scheduling pre-recorded footage, whether I want to wait all the way until January. It definitely doesn't feel like I would just have some massive burst of viewership. As far as watch time, I could potentially have 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, but 4,000 watch hours is not realistic to believe, so a bigger push starting in January does make some sense. Plus that gives me some more time to build a buffer. Some of the times I think that this trending page has been opened in the past, it has been opened to the wrong order, and we can see now Black Myth Wukong is down to the 4th spot, and I'm not sure that it hasn't been in the 4th spot for a while. There is some talk of DLC coming out for Black Myth Wukong, but even at that, as a single player game, I don't think it's going to go forever as far as staying up in the highest tier of games being played in a 24-hour period. The single player games that tend to stay up on this chart, the SteamDB chart, are ones that are very, very randomized. So Binding of Isaac is the prime example I would point to here, and it's still way down here in the 81st spot. But yeah, that's very randomized, and that gives you an excuse to keep on playing over and over again. Whereas the chart is otherwise just completely dominated with either player versus player online or some other player versus player or player with player game. I don't know how many co-op games there really are. So yeah, on that may very well be the reason why this chart is not shifted very much, is that I've been sampling the wrong information. But as this chart is right now, which I don't really think it's accurate, Black Myth Wukong has fallen down to the 2nd spot, with Counter-Strike 2 regaining the 1st spot. It is also moving into pastel colors as far as the color palette goes, and there might be some argument to see if I could change that, because my concern is if it goes into pastels now, what is it going to do when it runs out of colors next time? Is it going to cycle back, or is it going to go into something even lighter? Darker might not be too bad. And there is certainly, I guess, a point to ask as far as maybe the number of days being shown is going to become very useless as they become just like tiny little single pixel lines and get squished further and further down. I'm still toying with the idea of playing the Cardcaptor Sakura Memory Key Android game in its open beta. It's sleazy, frankly. And really what I would prefer is just to find a way to find some time to sit down and watch Cardcaptor Sakura dubbed, because I'm gonna be too lazy to watch it subbed, and then watch the Clear Card sequel. But yeah, as far as like reading the manga, you could do it online in a few places, but to actually buy the collections, the Tokobon is, I believe, what they're called when they collect manga that is pushed out weekly or monthly in magazines, which is how Cardcaptor Sakura was released in Japan. It's just really, really expensive because they're not in print. And just really expensive, frankly, to buy those kinds of books. I'm not sure that's even really the best way to engage with it, considering how Cardcaptor Sakura is very much a audio-visual experience more than it is a story experience. The story is good, yes, but it is much better with the different outfits and the colorfulness and the just cartoony kid-friendliness of the whole package. It feels like a cartoon, and it feels very good as a cartoon. Yeah. And yeah, the state of reading something like Weekly Shonen Jump, which can be done online, is still, I don't think, particularly good for kids these days, teenagers, whoever would be the right target audience in the West and the United States for that. Whereas you would think that would be a better situation. It is questionable if the better way to read manga may still be pirate sites instead of dealing with Crunchyroll or something, or just ignoring it completely. In the same way that comic books in the West, Marvel and DC comics in particular, are mostly best consumed by not being consumed at all and just waiting for any potential good stories, of which there's very little, to convert from being the comic print version into the Marvel movie or Warner Brothers movie, DC movie version. Or even some of the animated comic book Marvel and DC movies are just better experiences than trying to read the comics on a monthly or weekly basis, or trying to read a collected version in many cases. Yeah, that's probably a big thing, and this is not super video game related, but that probably is a big problem with Batman and the Avengers and the Superman type characters. The big characters is that because they have become iconically cartoonish in their storytelling and have to have this mass appeal, that they are better received now as a in a cartoon or in a movie format instead of in a comic book format, because you just can't really do too much with Batman that would be shocking, surprising, different, interesting at all. This is the argument I've heard many people make about Spider-Man in particular, is that you just can't do anything really with the character because the fandom just expects them to be the same, or the people in charge editorial expects them to be the same. There's a Planes, Trains, and Automobiles Fest. All my tabs are going to be out of order today. I did also do some tinkering with the view, the custom CSS of some of these pages that we'll see here in a second. I'm going to claim some free point shop items, and that's increasingly becoming the only thing I'm actually doing during these fests, is claiming pointless point shop items. Yeah, you really can't tell the kind of story like The Watchmen or Sandman with, you can't tell that kind of story that is something people will actually talk about years later with Batman, with Superman, with Spider-Man. And on maybe rare occasions you may get lucky and tell stories sort of like that, but really that even in those cases, a lot of the stories they talk about Spider-Man that are still being talked about years later are stories that were told decades ago when Spider-Man wasn't as big of a deal. Batman's the worst example, and that the thing that most people talk about Batman is the many iterations of them showing him his origin story, or the Killing Joke might be another example, just very long time ago stories. And they've tried it certainly since then, killing off the Joker completely and then bringing him back, having 3 Jokers. Those are very recent stories that have not received much favor and moved on and been forgotten about. Okay, so let's go through the news. I had to just kind of manually make this because I was working, because I messed up everything as far as where I was at, my markers as far as what stories we talked about before. So a game called Freedom Wars is coming to PC, Switch, and PlayStation in January. The game will run at 60 frames per second on PC and PlayStation platforms. What I should have done before I'm trying to see if this is really the end here, or if I'm cutting something off. Beta title and history is the bottom part of the text there. Beta title and the history of the handheld. So yeah, nothing's getting cut off. Good. What I should have talked about is that the Nintendo Switch 2 images of 3D CAD models of the Switch 2 have seemingly leaked just a few minutes ago onto the internet, assumedly from a Chinese factory where it's being assembled. And with that, there were also specs mentioned, and yeah, it looks very much like a Switch 2 as far as me quickly looking over it. It seems like it might have that magnetic technology that was thought they might adapt where there's a way to like flip a magnet that's really strong, and thus when you put these new Joy-Cons on the side, it will electronically flip a magnet to make them stick there, and that there just won't be an actual slot and rail system like the original Joy-Cons. Looks like the whole device might be a lot bigger. That it might be approaching, it's crazy to say, but a 10-inch screen. But yeah, that's probably way bigger than it actually would be. So the whole device may be bigger to match the thought that was speculated earlier that the Joy-Cons will be bigger. It also feels like there might be an extra trigger, so you will have kind of a curve around your pointer finger, in that the front of your pointer finger would be the trigger, and then the bend of your pointer finger would be the bump button. Or possibly you have just two different fingers pressing those and might be able to hold it that way too. But yeah, it does seem like they've either moved where the trigger is or adding a trigger. I guess they're probably just moving it, because I think the Joy-Cons do have a trigger on top of a bump. You kind of have to have had both, even when the Switch 1 came out. And then the speculation on the specs are that it's going to have kind of PS4 level graphics and GPU before PS4 Pro and Xbox Series X implemented deep learning super sampling, which then I think throws the whole calculation out the window. For it to be even that powerful is kind of surprising. That being said, it is also going to be, if any of these rumors are true, it's going to be a reduced instruction set RISC processor instead of an x86 processor, which means it's going to have terrible compatibility with PC games. Yeah, none of the Xbox or PlayStation games are going to port over easily if it's a RISC processor. That is just always the case, and it's always going to be the case. And it's going to have NVIDIA graphics instead of AMD graphics, which means it's also going to be more difficult to port over. So it definitely feels like it is more of a cell phone type design to start with, a very powerful cell phone concept, instead of staying in line with what you would expect from x86 gaming, PC gaming, Xbox gaming, PlayStation gaming. And so yeah, there could just be a massive long tail of compatibility issues that are as bad, if not worse, than the compatibility issues that already exist on the Switch. Switch is not known for being the place where you go to play 3D third-party games. And that's going to just make a bigger argument to not buy a Switch and instead buy a Steam Deck, which is really the argument I would like to make, and the argument I think Valve wants to make, and the argument I think more and more PC gamers and older kids are going to start making too. It is always going to be difficult to make that clean break, though, to get away from Nintendo and say, hey, I just don't care about playing Mario games or Zelda games or Metroid games. The only other thing I really saw when I was quickly scrolling down Reddit through this leak was, looks like there's just going to be a USB-C both on the top and the bottom, and yeah, internal storage is probably going to be a lot faster than the original Switch, but still a little slow compared to the Xbox Series X. But yeah, it looks like it's probably going to very much look and feel like a Switch. There's nothing crazy on it, no new touchpads or to compete with the Steam Deck. There's yeah, basically nothing physically different. It just looks like a Switch. Which, yeah, that's what pretty much everybody was expecting and wanting anyways. It would have been interesting if the next Nintendo console gets announced and it is just completely different, but I don't think they're going to do anything like that. The Dead by Daylight Project T spinoff, Dead by Daylight spinoff Project T has been cancelled, according to Video Games Chronicles. These are mostly Video Games Chronicles headlines we're going to go through first. Large-scale community testing for a new Battlefield game is coming in early 2025. They've been playing the game nearly daily for over a year, says the franchise boss. I also saw, and I'll have to chalk this one into rumor because I haven't seen anyone else other than one YouTuber talk about this, but somebody said that there was some more massive amounts of layoffs at Blizzard from Microsoft, which, if that's true, they're being slow to actually report on it. But yeah, that is, I mean, it is just this weird situation that a lot of game companies that have long histories are going to run into, in that while gamers may still have a love for the IPs of those games, like StarCraft and Diablo and Warcraft, the actual people that made those games have long since left, and the company is now just left with whatever hanger-ons as far as employees. And that's a mean way to describe it, but it really is the case. Most of the talent probably has been drained from Activision and Blizzard many years ago. And yeah, and sadly that means there probably is a logical evolution to play something closer to Path of Exile if you wanted to play a new game that was like Diablo 2. Then it makes sense to actually play Diablo 3, 4, or 3 or 4. Respawn is developing the final chapter of the Star Wars Jedi story. EA says over 40 million users have played the series to date, according to its publisher. So they're going to make it a trilogy, which is, I guess, fine. And then I imagine they might fairly quickly try and start a new trilogy or start to remaster the original game. September's PlayStation Plus game catalog and classic titles are now live. This month includes The Plucky Squire, Night in the Woods, and Secret Agent Clank. Some of these pages still have some oddness to them in how the images seem to want to center. And it still seems weird that these pictures at the bottom seem to work. So there's some more tinkering that needs to happen. And I think I want to tinker and see if I can get the subheadline here to always be smaller and wrapped down than the regular one, although maybe it would just be better to let it be. I am very likely approaching the point where tinkering is not worth the time. Certainly not accomplishing anything while I'm tinkering. EA has no plans for The Sims 5 as the franchise expands beyond the numbered releases. It will continue to support The Sims more than ever alongside new experiences. I'm still very much confused as far as what The Sims is supposed to be, or what it would make sense to be in general. Like this My Sims Cozy Bundle coming to Switch in November looks like a very kid-friendly game that you could call The Sims. A lot of it here, a lot of what The Sims could be could just be Animal Crossing without the best parts of Animal Crossing, which would be the animals and the characters. A lot of what the Cardcaptor Sakura mobile game also has elements that are ripped off from Animal Crossing, but it's not the main premise of the game. The main premise of the game, and why I said it was sleazy earlier, is that it's just really trying to make you get annoyed at waiting and spend microtransactions, which makes no sense at all that you would do that, particularly since it's a game that seems to be like it's going to be rated T for teen just because it's full of microtransactions when it should be rated E10 plus. Skate is officially launching in early access next year. Console playtests begin later this year. Here we have some more tinkering I need to do to see if there's a better way to make that look right. Darksiders 2 Definitive Edition is coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series X. So this doesn't feel to me like anything new from the Definitive Edition that was released on PC. It definitely feels like THQ Nordic is doing this in part to just make more money or keep Darksiders as a series in the minds of people. Really, though, somebody could have completely ripped off the story of Darksiders and finished the quadrilogy that Darksiders was supposed to be in the time that it has taken them to get to the point where they've made a Darksiders 3, which I played and didn't find particularly even that interesting. There is perhaps an argument to be made that the edgelord style of Darksiders made a lot of sense when Darksiders 1 came out, and it just is not the thing that really appeals to kids these days, and whoever your audience would be these days. And I personally find that very weird. As I look at the current generation of 14-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds, and they're just all really sweet kids for what it seems like. Maybe they've yet to hit that edgelord I hate everybody phase of their life. But yeah, there's just a whole different system there, and that negativity is not tolerated, not encouraged, not allowed. Whereas you go back and you look at like the movies in the 80s, whether you're talking something like The Breakfast Club or Hackers or Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like there's just a whole long list of here's movies of encouraging the next generation to be a little bit more antisocial, and then it gets really extreme in the 90s when you're like Donnie Darko and Fight Club and The Matrix and things like that. Yeah. But yeah, I just don't know if the style, the attitude, the whole WWE attitude era really sums it up. I'm not sure if that works nowadays, and maybe we have filed down edges on art and expression way too much, and this really is up for debate. to the point where now even video games as a form of art can no longer really be or won't appeal if they are more edgy. And then you see that in things like Devil May Cry perhaps not really going anywhere or having new games released for it, or Lollipop Chainsaw getting re-released and not really getting much fanfare or reviews from that. Moving on with the news, we actually have quite a lot today. The Minecraft console developer 4J Studios announces a new survival sandbox game. Minecraft YouTuber Stampy joined the studio this year to work on the game. It's called what? REFORJ? Reforge? Let's, I guess, look at it. Inherently, I would assume that this is just a Minecraft ripoff. Yeah. So apparently it's a voxel based thing there. The thing about ripping off Minecraft as it is and being able to smooth things down in the curves because it's voxel based, on a technical level it seems like that would be very interesting, but in a practical level that's not really what made Minecraft successful at all. And certainly we've seen other games try and do that and fail. Whereas the most successful ripoff of Minecraft has to be Terraria, which brings the graphics down to more simplistic 2D in its visuals. It is very much a community thing. And unless you can build a community, nothing's really going to happen there. It's also worth pointing out that Minecraft is very much a full-featured, overstuffed with features game at this point. So if you're going to rip off Minecraft, you're going to have all that redstone and every kind of flower and animal and crafting recipe and everything like that. And it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to do that. If anything, if I was going to rip off Minecraft, I'd probably want to set it in some kind of alien world with fewer resources, more simplistic crafting, automated crafting. Start off simple and start off intriguing with the visuals and intriguing with the story, and then slowly grow it over time to add more features if there really is a successful fan base that grows out of this. I'd also say Minecraft is just a thing that could have only happened at that specific point in its history and in time, and it's just not going to be repeated. We will see if my theories about Minecraft not being as popular are true once the Minecraft movie comes out, but even now the trailer has been completely rejected by everybody I've seen. Moving on, more Xbox Game Pass titles for September have been revealed. 2 more games will join the service on day 1. Wargrove 2 and Frostpunk 2 and Aura History Untold. And I'll leave it at that. Final Fantasy XVI's producer Yoshida discourages players from making, quote, offensive or inappropriate mods. The previous PS5 exclusive RPG launches on PC this week. I almost wonder if he is more ironically saying that instead of sincerely saying that, actually encouraging people from making offensive and inappropriate mods. What do they mean by offensive and inappropriate as far as the producer. Final Fantasy XVI's producer is notorious for being quoted and talking out of school quite a bit. See, the only thing I will say is I definitely don't want to say that's probably supposed to be C, anything offensive or inappropriate, so please don't make or install anything like that. At a certain level, that might just be a case where he's just trying to avoid controversy. I wouldn't be surprised if there actually aren't that many mods that are made for Final Fantasy XVI in the first place, because I really haven't seen any real fandom or love for any of the characters or the gameplay or anything like that. So I don't think Final Fantasy XVI is going to be inherently so easy that you could make a Skyrim-like mod, but for Final Fantasy XVI, and it would play better or look better. So yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if there are not that many mods. Now, inherently, having said that, almost certainly the top 5 mods that are going to be made are going to be clothing removal mods or clothing changing mods to make characters naked or semi-naked. Those are just easy mods to make, and things that there is an infinite appetite to exist to be made. But as far as otherwise offensive things, I don't think they're gonna be a lot of mods that add in anything super political or added blood or add violence. Like, it does kind of speak in a nice way to the gaming community that what are labeled as offensive and inappropriate mods really is just sex mods, just nudity. Like, the amount of violence is either already present in non-modded games to satisfy the desire of the video gaming community, to the point where the only desire that's not being satisfied is a nudity and sex, which it would be nice if that desire was satisfied by more artistic people in a way that would actually keep that adult sections of stores profitable and worth keeping around. But yeah, it would be a much worse situation if most mods for games were just political. If you just saw a whole bunch of vote for this person or don't vote for this person type mods being released for all kinds of games, or if they were extremely sadistic mods where it's just like add a ton more guts, show characters being disemboweled. And I'm sure there are some stories where that might feel a little bit appropriate, and there are some mods like that, but yeah, overall I would much prefer a society that is horny versus hateful. Moving on, Dragon's Dogma 2 patch adds a casual mode, more animations, and fast travel points. The update is rolling across all platforms now. It's been quite a while since I've seen a game add an easier mode to its lineup. There definitely was a point there where some games were coming out too on normal or hard modes only, and then that was affecting my decision as whether I was going to play them or not in a negative way. There's very few games that these days, though, that I would actually be afraid of purchasing just knowing it would be too difficult to play. Most games have a way to get to credits, at least on normal. Fighting games are about the one kind of game that I think I'm most afraid to play because of difficulty, because I just have no finger skills when it comes to playing fighting games. But everything else, I'm fairly confident that I could get the credits if I put the time in, which inherently is the next big concern, certainly when purchasing games or picking games to play, is do I want to pick a game that likely is going to be 200 plus hours of gameplay, like many RPGs are. Marvel vs. Capcom Collection Physical Switch Edition is a code in a box in Europe. Capcom has confirmed, whereas North America and Japan will be getting a cartridge, which Europe being treated differently is either because of Capcom or it is because of Nintendo of Europe doing things differently, negotiating things differently, which I'd assume it's Capcom, but who knows. First details on EA's new Battlefield have been revealed, including a modern setting. The game will ditch the 128 player matches, I didn't even know Battlefield had that, and specialists featured in Battlefield 2042. You certainly are being very ambitious to have 128 player matches. That being said, I would also say, like, the Fortnite concept, I think, has finally died down to the point where people aren't really super hyped on that. The Fortnite concept being several mini players are on a map, and the map is just continuously shrinking, forcing the players towards the center, killing off each other. But yeah, I haven't seen a lot of games recently try to do that style of gameplay, which that was a style of gameplay that had very little chance of surviving for the long run, because there's just not enough people at any one point to have a bunch of games like that. Astrobot has solid first week in the US, with sales trailing only NBA 2K25. The Astrobot DualSense controller was also the best-selling accessory during its launch week. Yep, I did hear some praise for Astrobot. Also, just not hearing a lot of people talking about any games they're playing. Somewhat, it's a case that I've shifted my news sources, so I'm seeing a lot more people talk about the Steam Deck, even though there's really not that much to even say about the Steam Deck right now. And certainly I've just been busy with other things. Bungie is reportedly considering a $40 price tag for Marathon. The Sony published shooter could be falling in the footsteps of Helldivers 2 and Concord. What are the footsteps of Helldivers 2 and Concord? Wasn't Concord shut down and refunded after a couple days? And Helldivers 2, on the other hand, has been super successful. So, did all those games have a $40 price tag? Yeah, I don't understand the comparison there. Probably is a better argument to say, though, that since these games, these live service games, are inherently just adapting all those free-to-play microtransaction gimmicks, the games themselves should be free to start, and consoles don't really want to do that, so getting it down to $40 is at least a step in that direction. Of course, there's plenty of games that cost $60 or even $80 and still have a whole bunch of microtransactions in them. But I'm not sure that's going to last forever. I think more and more gamers are less willing to actually engage in purchasing microtransactions. I'm a little surprised that there isn't a situation where you're going to have to put in a credit card the second you buy the next video game console available. probably the Switch 2. I wouldn't be surprised if there is just a requirement there for perhaps even just age verification reasons, in that you have to put in a credit card and have that credit card on file for microtransactions. Of course, maybe that's still too risky of a thing, but as we go to a potential diskless future with the PlayStation and the Xbox in the next generation, or perhaps the generation after that, you would inherently have to put in a credit card to purchase any digital game and have that on file. At which point every microtransaction is made just a little bit easier. It really speaks to the poor quality of microtransactions, that their entire business is in part built around the hope that a unknowing kid just purchases a whole bunch of stuff and without their parents' permission. The first ever Shovel Knight concert has been announced. Tickets are now for sale for 2 US performances. US, not, this is all capitalized, so this, they needed to put U period, S period. 2 US performances in early 2025. There has been, I think, a slight growing number of these concerts based on video game music. I've seen a lot of them happen in Japan in the past few years, where you'll have like a Final Fantasy night of concert music being played. That being said, I haven't really seen it come over to the United States in large numbers, and it may very well be more of a statement that the orchestras that still exist and are trying to find relevancy to still exist are going out of their way to encourage video game music. I'm noticing something about this picture, in that undoubtedly this picture has some part of it being cut off on the edge. Okay, so that does show me what I need to fix then, so I'll tinker with that. Starfield's Shattered Space expansion gets a 9-minute deep dive video. The game's first major DLC launches in late September. It is questionable how many people even purchased Starfield to begin with. It is an interesting situation, though, where you have a game that very likely should have been just abandoned by Microsoft still getting support. So as gamers, we do get to see an example that we rarely get to see of what would happen to a video game if it wasn't just abandoned by the publisher and developer after it had a poor reception. We've also, though, already seen that happen in, what's the name of that game? I want to say The Outer Worlds, but that's not the name of it. Well, there was a space game that came out a couple of years ago to very poor reception and in very poor quality, and they just kept working on it and adding features for years and years, and now it is in a pretty good state. They clearly are trying to do the same thing at Bethesda with Starfield, but if I was in charge of Microsoft, I'd probably say, you know what, Starfield was just a failure, it was poorly received, let's scrap all work for Starfield and instead put all that effort into the next Elder Scrolls game. Of course, if I was in charge of Microsoft, I'd also tell them to move to the Unreal Engine and get away from the creation engine, which would probably severely delay the progression of the next Elder Scrolls game, but it's a pain. It really needs to happen. Speaking of Unreal, I got an email from Unreal in that the Unreal Engine store has apparently shifted over to a new store, at least in the European Union, called Fab. And I don't know why I got this email in particular from Epic, but yeah, seems like they're putting their asset store under a different branding, making little changes. Probably because there were some likely bad stories on the internet about the asset store, would be my guess. So move it to a new store so it doesn't show up in a Google search. Black Myth Wukong DLC is reportedly planned for early 2025. Game Science wants to launch an expansion to coincide with the Chinese New Year, it's claimed. That certainly would make a lot of sense. Of course, inherently that would be true for almost any Chinese game developer, if there were any other Chinese game developers worth mentioning. Yeah. Here's another example of where this subheadline is weird. It's way too long and should be always shorter. So I always want it to be just like an upside down pyramid as far as the squeeze, and I'm not sure if I can actually do that with modifying HTML. Now, pretty sure we've got some other stuff from Video Games Chronicle, so let's go ahead and try and get them. Apparently Nintendo is looking to add Super NES mouse support to Switch Online games. This claim the info was found in today's Switch Online update. If they did that, then they'd almost certainly either sell a USB mouse that worked way better than the Super NES mouse. It really would only be for a couple of games. Yeah, most of the Super NES mouse compatibility was exclusive to Japan. And really the Super NES mouse, I guess, was the end of Nintendo ever trying to have any parity with computers. Like, since then, there's been no mouse pointer input decision that felt like a mouse. There were touchscreens on the DS that were, I guess, somewhat close, and then the Wiimotes sometimes could be turned into a pointer, pointed things. And it certainly also speaks to a case where mouse-based games, were much more closer to something like World of Warcraft or Command and Conquer Red Alert, those are the kinds of games that really do need a mouse, whereas most games are much better off, in my opinion, being controlled by a controller, even though controllers are not better than mouse and keyboard by any means. The lack of, I want to say fidelity, the lack of resolution that a mouse has is nothing compared to the lack of resolution that an analog stick has. Analog sticks are way less precise in the amount of detail you can input, and that's kind of a good thing, because with a simplified gamepad controller, the games have to be easier. With a mouse and keyboard, games can just get harder and harder, and you really are just moving up to, you're playing pro level gaming with pro level players. If they do add some kind of USB mouse thing, I wouldn't be surprised if very little of it comes to the West. I wouldn't be surprised if it is just a Japanese exclusive completely. They may also very well just emulate a mouse, since they already have a touchscreen, which would make a lot of sense also. See, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy XVI sales did not meet expectations, according to Square Enix, which is inherently everything Square Enix always says for every game that's been released in like the past, I'm gonna say 10 years. It is a management problem at Square Enix in that they have externally spoken publicly about having way too high expectations on everything and then not changing one thing at all. They just complain about it, and the Japanese companies, I imagine, just ignore the complaints as best they can, or drink themselves into a stupor because their bosses are complaining, which is also a possibility, and get depressed. Whereas the Square Enix companies that Square Enix used to own, the Hitman companies and the Tomb Raider companies, got tired of it and left and became parts of Embracer. Even if these games didn't make expectations, it's just incredibly bad management to say it out loud or in a shareholders meeting. Just because these are your flagship titles. You take away Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, and you've got nothing as far as being a tentpole game or a flagship game. And at that point, you might as well just shut down the whole company. You definitely should be propping up Final Fantasy. Unfortunately, it really is getting to the point, though, where Final Fantasy as a series of series, really, is becoming less and less relevant. And if I was going to play a Japanese RPG, I definitely think I would lean much more to playing something like Dragon Quest, maybe Monster Hunter, or Atelier, one of the Atelier series. That's just off the top of my head. I definitely would not want to play the Final Fantasy series at this point. Not as my first pick, at least. Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered has been rated by the ESRB. It's already available on PC and PS5 via backwards compatibility, so one would assume that it's either coming to the Xbox or the Switch or the Switch 2 or PS5 as a native game. I doubt, though, a remaster of the first game is going to revitalize interest in the Horizon series. They really just dropped the ball on that series. And it's a shame because, like, it should have been a much more longer lasting experience. Never attack the fans is something that just needs to get reminded to developers and repeated over and over again. Even if the fans are being completely ridiculous, which they may very well be, or some of them may very well be acting completely ridiculous, you should just never attack the fans. That's something I guess Disney and Star Wars should learn their lesson too. There's been so many cases of this. But yeah, your fans are your lifeblood, your source of income, so you never attack them at all. This is something people should have known, even as far as like bands. Like, bands become popular, they sometimes get fandoms that maybe they don't really enjoy as much, but you've just got to pander to those fans and sell out as much as possible if you're making a commercial product, which video games are inherently a commercial product, unless you just want to make an indie game and throw it out there and not make any sales. But when you're being published and funded by PlayStation like Horizon was, that's just kind of crazy. It is silly that I think I personally could make some broad stroke management decisions running a video game company and run it better, just by some basic general concepts of never attacking the fans, and supporting games when they need to be supported, and killing games when they need to be killed, getting rid of microtransactions or reducing them severely. Generally just having a silence policy. Silence is golden as far as not shooting your mouth off. Multiversus Season 3 trailer reveals the Powerpuff Girls and Nubia. A new stage based on Gremlins will also be added. I feel like that was old news, although I don't really know who Nubia is. Oh, that guy. Steven Universe character, I believe. See, the Powerpuff Girls being animated this way, I think is much closer to... I think maybe they made a second Powerpuff Girls cartoon in that CGI style. That definitely is not the way they were animated in the original Powerpuff cartoon. And so it just feels very odd. But that is kind of the chibi style that is in the Cardcaptor Sakura game too, is that you'll get these little chibi doll characters that are in 3D when Cardcaptor Sakura anime is completely 2D 90s style anime. And it just comes off as very weird. I think I opened all of those. Yeah, I did. But I do think I am fairly caught up now as far as things go. And so I don't think we've skipped a bunch of news stories. We probably haven't skipped any at all. There are some news stories from Twitter. It definitely feels like a lot of people are moving over to WhatsApp. We may very well see in a year or so that WhatsApp just becomes the default place people go. I'm gonna probably want to wait a year to see, but Netflix has like a where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? No, what was it? Tomb Raider? Yeah, I think Netflix has a Tomb Raider thing. You know what? I'll talk about it at the end of the stream. Let's go through the Gamatsu articles. So a roguelike deck builder, the Fable manga built roguelite, has been announced for Switch and PC. There is a thing, particularly about manga being mostly black and white, that makes it less ideal to play on a color screen that's not something like e-paper or e-ink. This is weird, to say the least. So it's a Tetris game, but your Tetris pieces are these very rough manga panels. Although inherently, that means all the panels are going to be very discrete and separated from each other, which is not always the case in manga. And you're not just going to... It's not like there's a panel layout editor that would do that in manga. You would kind of know how much room you plan on taking up of the page and plan accordingly as far as what you're drawing. You not draw the panels separately and then move them around. And the tic-tac-toe or the Tetris element of that really just seems to give you some kind of points as far as attack and hit in more of a turn-based fighting mechanic. Particularly with this style, I find that uninteresting. It is surprising though that there isn't a default like Nintendo Switch reading app. Like I don't know if there's apps on the eStore at all that aren't really just portrayed as games. But yeah, I know that there's like some Netflix and YouTube video streaming apps, but reading in particular, I don't know. You'd think that Nintendo would have at least something like that, where they could throw their own Nintendo comics on it, sell it for a few dollars, and just keep kids look interesting and looking like they're reading. One of the best things that a new Switch could do, and even the old Switch could do, is just have better parental controls integrated into a parental control system, which there really isn't anything like that. I would assume you would just want to integrate it into a screen time system with Apple and do an iPhone interconnectedness. You could certainly go with Google, but there's a higher likelihood that parents would have iPhones than Android phones. You could certainly do both. It is kind of crazy that there isn't a standard like that at this point. Just now, Android Auto 15 has been rewritten so that you can actually send the audio of a Android-based radio head unit, entertainment unit, to Bluetooth headphones. Which, yeah, you would think that would have been implemented a long time ago. And right now, with Android Auto 15, it's probably just going to be whatever audio is playing on the radio unit is going to go to one set of Bluetooth headphones, and that's it. When really it should be a case where there's support for at least 8, maybe 16, at the very little 4 Bluetooth devices that could be connected and could be listening to completely different audio sources on the one entertainment unit. One kid listening to one channel on the radio, another kid listening to another, one kid listening to a streaming Spotify app, something like that. And then when Bluetooth 6 comes out, the Aurora Cast standard could be implemented at some point, where you would have a better way of broadcasting the same audio source to multiple devices. But yeah, it really is just a matter of good programming, a lack of good programming that Bluetooth car units. That is also something uniquely you would only really do in a car. And you could certainly just have each person have their own individual device, but maybe the parents want to see what they're listening to, want to control it, and maybe there's an argument there to not have to buy an individual device for each person. I was also, speaking of, there ought to be a standard and there isn't, I was looking for power over Ethernet network floor standing surround sound speakers, and can't really find a lot of them. Like, there might be one or two that exist, but they are very expensive, like $1,500 maybe for a pair of speakers. Which speakers tend to be expensive, but not that expensive, where it would make a lot of sense to, if you were building a surround sound setup in multiple rooms and you want to connect everything via longer runs, power over Ethernet network cords, and connect it in such a way that 2 people in 2 rooms can be listening to the same audio. There's not a real standard there, and ideally it should be the Dante standard, but Dante is kind of new and kind of expensive. With Dante, theoretically you could have every room wired with good quality surround sound speakers. There's a lot of low quality announcement in ceiling speakers, but yeah, with Dante you could theoretically have every room wired with speakers and TVs, and then decide to switch around who is watching what. Although maybe that really is not as necessary. that we really are at a point as far as technology where features should be continued to be made, but they are being made because they're cool technology more than there's a high demand. Most people have what they actually need as far as technological features. That being said, I did just look at a list of new features added to Android iOS 18, and yeah, I know I'm not talking about video games. At least I'm rambling an hour into the stream instead of rambling at the very beginning. A lot of the features in iOS Android 18 do feel like they are just playing catch up and stealing ideas from Apple, and I'm sure they go back and forth, and I'm not trying to be a Android fanboy or anything like that, but yeah, I do have the suspicion that if I ever actually got an iPhone in my hand, I would find it very lackluster compared to what I can do with my Android phone. That being said, I'd also say my Samsung Galaxy Android phone has some real problems too, as far as it makes it difficult to find the right settings, if there are even any right settings, to get my smart doorbell to actually pop up as a full screen notification instead of trying to put all of the notifications in the notification bar, which is fine for most notifications, but not fine if somebody's ringing your doorbell and you want to actually video chat and have a pop-up that shows you a picture of them. But yeah, and my Samsung phone with its location, my smart lock on my front door has never worked once, as far as figuring out that I'm entering an area and unlock the door, and I assume that's because it's Samsung version of Android, since that would be my guess. Anyways, let's get back to the Gematsu articles. That should have been one that I looked to see if there was a Steam link, because I didn't get any of the Steam links open. Slime 3K Rise Against Despot launches October 31st. It's been in early access since November 2023, which that seems like that's going to be a while, or that's been a while. A 4-team hero first-person shooter, Heart Electric, has been announced for PC. 4 teams of 3 players battle for life-sustaining energy. It's more difficult, definitely, to find the Steam links now that I've changed the CSS on these pages to not underline or highlight the links with a different color. Luma Island launches November 20th. Steamfest's next demo is available October 14th. Suppose it is also worth pointing out that the sales for LCD Steam Decks are still going on until the 26th, so you have 8 more days unless they sell out early. Arsene Lupin Once a Thief launches October 17th. This is based off of the famous Lupin Gentleman Thief series. Not so much Lupin the Third, the spin-off of that. And one of the things about Lupin is I really don't know the original story, the canonical Lupin. So I've seen some weird adaptations, and I'm not sure what elements are canonical. In the same way that if you watched all the Sherlock Holmes movies and read all the spin-offs and or things based off of Sherlock Holmes, a lot of the elements are not present in the original Sherlock Holmes stories. Right. That should bring us to GameDeveloper.com somewhat. We're probably going to jump back to Gematsu. There's a report that Behavior Interactive is shuttered Midwinter Entertainment after scrapping the Dead by Daylight spinoff. Again, this text seems really, really small. And the only thing I really would say is that the margin here probably should be a little bit more inward. But that's not really terrible either. I don't know why I'm keeping the end of show interstitial at all. Alright, so the toy robot puzzle platformer A Red Walking Robot has been announced for PS4 and 5 and PC. Which is funny because they had already announced a different company had announced a different game with a small little robot, Chibi Robo inspired game. Let's see. I have a lot of tabs here from Gematsu. I imagine a lot of these are old or tabs that we've already talked about. Dead Rising Deluxe we talked about being released. That we talked about. That we talked about. Story trailer. Shattered Space trailer. Vampire themed first person shooter Trust announced for PC. Turn-based RPG Forge of the Fae official trailer Kickstarter campaign launches in late September. It's been a while since we've seen a game with a Kickstarter campaign. Disney Pixel RPG launches October 7th. This too might be a game that I give a chance to. Yep. But I'm not sure I'm really going to stick with it for very long. We are seeing some level of improvement as far as just seems like higher quality products are at least trying to make mobile games now instead of brand new companies making products. Disney definitely should have been making a lot more smartphone games for the past decade, and they really haven't done a lot if they've made much of anything. Awaken Astral Blade for the PS5 and PC launches October 22nd. PS4 version, not dated. Now I recall another game called Astral Blade, but I don't think this game has anything to do with it. This is part of PlayStation's China Hero project, and we once again have a Stellar Blade style. Let's paint the clothes on so that they are impossibly tight, and they might as well be naked for as much curvature of the body you're actually seeing here, plus different colored eyeballs. So doing several gimmicks here. The concern certainly I would have here, though, if this is a Chinese game, because it's part of the China Hero project, it may not be particularly high quality. The thumbnail there is not really what you're going to be seeing when you're playing, obviously. It's much more zoomed out. But I also wouldn't be surprised if there's just a level of Chinese censorship in this game. And so it's going to barely get away with showing a skin-tight outfit and nothing else. There was another game that I played several months ago where it sold itself very much on lewd thumbnails and tight clothing, and the actual game was fairly boring and repetitive as a side-scrolling hack and slash game. Yeah. So I've already been bitten by games like this already, by screenshots like this, so I would want to be very careful. I keep clicking Steam, hoping that actually goes to a Steam page and doesn't just go to the link of all Steam articles. A colorful action RPG called Starlight Revolver has been announced for PC. I think we may have talked about this. This one doesn't have a Steam page link. Again, it's another game where the thumbnails aren't really matching what the game looks like. So we really have gotten to the point where video game thumbnails are becoming much more like YouTube thumbnails, in that they can be very deceptive and dishonest. I Chew Chibi Edition launches October 3rd in the West. You follow the story of 32 boys aspiring towards their idol debuts. Dragon's Dogma Casual Mode update is now available. I didn't look for a Steam link on that previous article. You see Ronnie Raj Das saying hi on the chat. Hi. Long list of fixes here. My Time at Evershine has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, PC, and Switch, and the Switch successor, with a Kickstarter campaign launching on September 24th. Is this a continuation of the My Time series? Apparently it is. So My Time at Porsche and My Time at Sandrock, which I barely even remember My Time at Sandrock, and I have to assume that this My Time series definitely is just a loosely connected set of games, because this does not look anywhere close to the animation style of My Time at Porsche. We already talked about Game Pass adding Aura, History Untold, Frostpunk 2, and Wargrove in late September. Oh. I saw that there was this AI-based, well, they're saying it's AI-based, it probably really isn't much of AI, large language module. If anything, it might very well be a curated medium language module as far as how big it is. Rumpelstiltskin, no, not Rumpelstiltskin, Robo-Stuckskin, the talking bear type ripoff. I think his name is Poi. It's like $50 on Amazon. Really cheap for what you're getting there. Stuffed bear, the mouth moves when it talks and tells you a story, and there's a free app where the child can pick what elements they want in the story that's going to be told. Then it uses quote-unquote AI to generate the story and save it to the stuffed bear, and then the stuffed bear can tell you the story now or tell you the story later, so it doesn't have to be directly connected with the app while it's spouting off the story. And they sell it certainly around the idea that it's very safe and it's not going to hallucinate via AI and say something crazy or something incredibly offensive. But yeah, for younger kids, it's a interesting thought, certainly, in that it tells them stories and lets them be involved in creating the stories, and is only $50, whereas it probably could have been a lot more expensive. But yeah, I saw that and it caught my eye. Of course, you have to get the kids at a very specific age group for that to be a useful toy. Like, if kids already are comfortable and more would prefer to read on their own, then they're probably going to be too old for it. And if they got a kid that was very young, they would probably be too young for it. But yeah, I would say somewhere between 4-year-old and maybe 9-year-olds at the latest. It give you a decent amount of time. Of course, if they're past the age where they want a teddy bear, that's too old too. Anyways, back to Gematsu news. We're gonna go long today, I can tell, just because I've opened probably a whole bunch of extra stories that either I missed in previous streams or have already talked about. The Overlord mobile RPG, Lord of Nazarick, is coming to the West this fall. This is the first title to fully implement a Crunchyroll login. Interesting, so you'd have to have a Crunchyroll account at least. I'm not sure if they're free or if that's a membership-based thing to play this game. Although at a certain level that almost starts to make sense to require Crunchyroll logins on games based off of Crunchyroll published in the West type medium. One membership that would get you streaming video and manga reading and video games might make some sense, in the same way that Netflix is trying to do the same thing, where Netflix started as a video streaming service, but their account also now includes Netflix games. And certainly Amazon Prime is free shipping plus Prime Video plus Prime Games and Prime Photos and Prime Music. Probably a couple other Prime things. The farming life simulation game Orange Season launches October 24th for the PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. It's currently early access for PC. Don't think I have anything else to say there. A survivor-like roguelite action game called Wild Keepers Rising has been announced for PC. And what they mean by survivors like in this case is Vampire Survivors, not Survivor the TV show. So really should be, so they're coining a phrase hit there as far as survivor like. I'm not sure if it's really going to catch on though. Darksiders 2 Definitive Edition, Death Initiative Edition is coming to the PS5, Xbox Series on October 15th as a free upgrade. Like most free upgrades, I have some fuzzy memories that the original version of the Definitive Edition had some bugginess to it on PC. I would assume they've patched all of that out by now. A puzzle adventure game called Control Alt Ego is coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series on September 24th. This is already on Steam. It's been there since 2022. Jim Drops is going to exhibit 3 unannounced titles at the Tokyo Game Show, plus Pico Park 2. Skate launches in early access in 2025. We also saw a story in the previous stream that Tony Hawk was talking about making a new Tony Hawk game, so I wouldn't be surprised if Skate launches in early access under the name Skate and then somehow Tony Hawk gets added to the name of Skate. It is kind of crazy, as old as Tony Hawk is, that there isn't somebody else willing to license their likeness to a video game, a skating video game. Let's see, Astria 6-sided oracles for the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series and the Switch launches September 26th. It's a roguelike deck builder currently available on PC. River City Girls 2 DLC characters Billy and Jimmy have been delayed to fall. No longer coming out in the summer. Summer is pretty much over, though, so no real surprise there. The Clock Tower Rewind remaster, it launches October 29th in the West. That is 2 days before the Japanese release. I kind of want to see Clock Tower get an amazingly large amount of reception, but I seriously doubt it will. It is perhaps echoing what is seemingly a trend of remaking fairly old horror games like Silent Hill, but Silent Hill certainly has a much more of a relevant experience, and remaking Silent Hill makes a lot more sense. Most people have never played or even heard of Clock Tower. A game called Bloodless for the Switch launches October 10th. It's currently also available for PC. I've also noticed that now that Borderlands 4 has been announced / teased, the Borderlands Twitter accounts seem to be giving out shift codes once again, which I thought they said at one point the only way you were going to get shift codes is if you signed up for the emails, and it seems like they've undone that decision and they're now trying to use shift codes as a way of getting people hyped about Borderlands 4 and getting people forgetting about the fact that the Borderlands movie came out less than a month ago and was a huge disaster. Star Wars Jedi Final Chapter is in development at Respawn Entertainment. We already saw an article about that. El Paso Elsewhere is now available for iOS, priced at a mere $4.99. Interesting that they're mentioning the price. Freedom Wars Remastered has been announced for the PS4 and 5, Switch, and PC. We talked about that already. I'm still just trying to find all the Steam links, if there is a link. Well, you can definitely see how terrible the graphics were and how much this game really did need a remaster. As low res, certainly. I wonder if we'll hit a point where the AI lazy form of remastering things actually does make some sense in video games. Well, effectively, deep learning super sampling is already kind of remastering games to do that, but so they may just hide the fact that things are being generated via a procedure or via guesses, and instead of pure artistic intent. But for video games, I don't think most gamers are going to care that much, as long as it's not crazy AI that just adds extra hands or extra fingers to hands, which I don't think video games will run into that same problem, because I don't think they're going to try to generate things using the newest, most complex forms of image generation versus just slight image manipulation and frame by frame manipulation to smooth things out. I guess it is just going to be the new anti-aliasing argument, as far as, do you want to turn on anti-aliasing or do you want to see the art as it was originally created? A game called Urban Myth Dissolution Center adds a PS5 version. Physical editions are available for the PS5 and Switch in Japan. This is a weird looking game. I have no idea what it actually is. My guess is that this is some kind of creepy visual novel. Like, totally could be wrong about it. They're calling it an adventure game. So yeah, it might be a 2D point and click adventure game too. Super NES, Nintendo Switch Online adds Battletoads Double Dragon. I assume that's supposed to be... Nope, it literally is Battletoads Double Dragon combo game. Cosmo Gang, the puzzle, and Kunio-kun no Dodgeball da Yo Zinin Shugo, which I probably didn't pronounce that right. So like one recognizable Western Super NES game and then 3 Famicom games. It may be that there's just a lot more Famicom games or Super Famicom games. I think there is. I think there's several hundred more Japanese Famicom games than NES games, and very possibly several hundred more Super Famicom games versus Super NES games. The crafting survival game called EXE or Exilo has been announced for PC. This is a different crafting survival game from the other one we saw. We're almost done with all the Komatsu articles. A 2D adventure game called Monpick, the Hatchling Meets a Girl, has been announced for Switch, PC, iOS, and Android. So I wonder if this is kind of a animal raising game, or if it's maybe more of a Pokemon game. I think it's probably closer to an animal raising game if I was to guess. It might be fairly short of an experience. The Famitsu review scores for issue 1866 are here, giving Astrobot 36 out of 40, which really goes to highlight when you have 4 reviewers, even if all 4 of them want to give it a 9 out of 10, that still averages to 36 out of 40 when not a 39 out of 40. Black Myth Wukong, in comparison, is 3 points lower at 33 out of 40, still a very good number. Then Legend of Heroes Kira no Kai no Kisekai, 32 out of 40. And this game, Moe Yo Otome Dashu visual novel, 32 out of 40. Star Wars Outlaws, 32 out of 40. So only the biggest failure here is the Unamusume Pretty Derby. That's, I believe, the anime girls as anthropomorphic horses game at 29 out of 40. Kind of a large number of games released also to be reviewed. Usually Famitsu really is only reviewing 3 or 4 games. And then the ESRB has rated Horizon Zero Dawn remaster for PS5 and PC. Okay. So then that's going to bring me to GameDeveloper.com articles, I think. Yeah, let's see how we want to sort through this. Come over here. Yeah, GameDeveloper.com, trying to have another theme week of photography week this time. Ridiculousness. This does remind me, though, that I'm probably never going to get back to playing the new Pokemon Snap game on my Switch, or very possibly I'm never going to get back to playing any Switch game. UK studio In Dreams has confirmed layoffs that should impact 17.5% of the workforce. So more bad news as far as layoffs go. Noticeably, both Gamatsu and Video Games Chronicles seem to have stopped really reporting on that and weren't really reporting on layoffs that much anyways. Pocket Pair says Palworld won't go free to play, but admits it flirted with the idea. IBM has won a $44.9 million patent infringement suit against Zynga. Zynga argued that it violated none of IBM's, quote, invalid patents and plans to appeal the verdict. The thing here in particular that I want to know is, what are these patents and should they be? Should they really have won this lawsuit? Because certainly IBM is not really acting as far as making games themselves or making much of anything. I'm not sure if IBM even makes hardware and sells hardware anymore as far as computers. 2 years ago, IBM claimed that Farmville Creator was misusing its foundational web technology, including data capture and analytics. The two companies had reportedly been negotiating a license since 2014, but those talks reportedly fell through. IBM is also suing e-commerce site Rakuten. So inherently, IBM is claiming they own something somewhat simplistic based on internet services. They tried to sue Chewy, but that was dropped entirely. Yeah. Farmville, Crosswords with Friends, and Wizard of Oz slots. Yeah. Almost certainly this is not the kind of settlement you would want to have seen it go the other way. Not just because people like Farmville more than they do IBM, but because it seems like IBM is very quickly just becoming a patent troll. And likely the argument that the patents are invalid is a good argument to make. Unfortunately, it's not one they succeeded with. Touch Arcade is shutting down after 16 years. Apparently they're out of money. What is Touch Arcade though? I should know. It's a website. Okay. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing more and more of that happen too. Websites just being shut down as far as video game journalist websites. But yeah, it definitely speaks to their level of success that I don't even recognize the name. I have thought Touch Arcade was a real arcade somewhere. It might also be a case that Touch Arcade was designed originally for cell phone gaming, and that hasn't gone anywhere in 16 years. Let's see. Games featuring paid loot boxes will soon receive a mandatory M rating in Australia, which, while I do think the Australian government often is very heavy-handed with its censorship, it's not the worst thought in the world to start punishing companies that have loot boxes, or at least put loot boxes games only in the hands of adults, instead of loot boxes being put in the hands of kids and teenagers. Team 17 wants to dip into the mergers and acquisitions market less than a year after layoffs, which certainly that shows a poor direction for their leadership. That is definitely crazy. Let's see. And then the update here, The Sims is moving beyond sequential releases to avoid resetting players' progress. There. Update here saying it's not going to get a multiplayer mode as first reported by Variety. The upcoming expansion project Renee is a standalone experience focused on building ways for friends to meet, connect, and share while playing through an all-new world. I do see the idea of kind of not resetting a player's progress. That doesn't inherently mean you couldn't just have the data shift over from a Sims 4 to a Sims 5. That's certainly something Pokemon players would have liked if the progress and the levels you had built up on your Pokemon carried over from every Pokemon game, and they still really haven't implemented something like that to an easy way. Let's see. Ubisoft is calling devs back into the office for 3 days a week. Also saw, I think it was Amazon calling employees back to work 5 days a week. So completely eliminating remote work. Unity brings the Struct Use GC tool to the web platform Crazy Games. I think this might be more of an advertisement than actual news. The Respawn Star Wars Jedi franchise has topped 40 million players. A new studio called Podo Labs, formed by Capcom and Riot Games alums. And then EA desperately wants investors to know it's on the generative AI bandwagon, is the last article from GameDeveloper.com. And yeah, I definitely would see EA being very heavy-handed in trying to use generative AI to create content in a lazy, cheap fashion. I could see it definitely being something that they would do for their sports games in particular. So let's go through all the games on Steam, and somewhere in this should be a list of games we clicked on. So yeah, this is going to be a free update. The reviews are still very positive as far as Zero Dawn is concerned. It's just, once again, one of those cases where you probably should just play the first game and then ignore the fact that there is a second game at all. So these are all of the Gamatsu articles that I clicked on. This one's already on the follow list. Still is very much a case where if something bothers to put out a press release to Komatsu, it almost certainly does deserve a YouTube short. Notice how mixed the reviews are though for Dragon's Dogma, and I can't believe that all of that is just because a casual mode is needed. So that does not inspire a lot of confidence. And then eventually we will get to just generic games that I had opened up from Steam to look at. And I may have gone back very far as far as the games go. There is still a lot of room for some follow-ups cleanup too. I'm also working or thinking about the updating what my second screen is going to show instead of just showing YouTube. I mean, just showing Yu-Gi-Oh! Which, since I'm not playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just increasingly pointless and stupid to say no to this one. This one seems too simplistic. A lot of these pages may not have loaded completely. Yeah, it does just kind of seem kind of silly to continue to have Yu-Gi-Oh be my second screen. I really should just have some background audio of some sort, and ideally it's going to be a slideshow of the top 100 most played games, the trending games. Yeah. And once again, I'm having to rush here because I need a bathroom break. I could have started a little bit earlier today, but my power decided to flicker, and anytime my power goes out it only went out for a couple of minutes, but there's always that question about, will it go out again in the middle of the stream? And I don't have my setup correct in that I don't have battery backups plugged into my internet, and I don't even think there's 100% chance, that guaranteed chance, that even if I did have both my cable modem and router connected to a battery backup, that it would matter, because it may very well be that the connections themselves back to their servers, as far as my ISP, they may very well not be battery backed up the whole way. And if the internet's not working, then basically nothing's working. That is true for cell phones and computers. There was a point where you could have a computer and not have it connected to the internet, and it would still be a useful device of some level. Now you might as well turn the computer off if you don't have internet. Since that's already negative, I'm going to take that one off. And today's the September 18th, and we're looking at September 17th, so I don't think we're in the worst spot ever. This Machina Atlas game, I covered the first game in this series, and it was too simplistic of a game. It is basically a Room ripoff, but yeah, not really good enough. Must have finally come out of early access or something. Lucky Squire. I still am very much having a problem that once I stream 3 days out of the week, that's kind of it for me. I don't do anything more for the rest of the day. I'm also falling asleep at like 6 or 7 in the evening, and then waking up and then falling asleep again at like 1 or 2 in the morning. So the whole time schedule is really off. I started watching Only Murderers in the Building and Solar Opposites, and let's see, Futurama. So I've been watching a lot of TV. I'm also started watching Cream Pie. No, not Cream Pie. I think the game probably was supposed to be called, the TV show on Hulu was supposed to be called Cream Pie, but it's called Creamery. Which is a dark comedy of all the men die, and then it's a future run by women, but surprise, surprise, a man shows up. It seems like it's more of a comedic take on something like Why the Last Man, which Why the Last Man as a TV show failed, and honestly I think Why the Last Man as a comic failed. Started off somewhat strong and then just kind of fizzled, and I suspect that's the case for a lot of comic series. In a lot of ways, I guess this is just an Autopet Battler clone. Things like the Umbrella Academy Netflix series start to make a little bit more sense, in that they change things and go in a very different direction. But yeah, I'll also say most comics to Netflix series have not succeeded particularly well either. See, we're on September 18th, so there really can't be that many more. I'm trying to be fairly critical on what I'm curating. Yeah, Amazon announced its second out of 3 or 4 sales in the last quarter of the year. Big Prime Day or Prime Big Day sale happening in October in just a couple of weeks. Of course, my budget's blown on non-YouTube stuff already, so I don't think I'll be buying anything pretty much at all other than what I was already gonna buy probably before the sale happens. In fairness, the Amazon sales have proven themselves to be almost completely useless unless you just have a long wish list of things that you were thinking about buying anyways, and then in that case you might get a decent sale. Like right now, the SwitchBot, even before the big day sale, the SwitchBot S10 robot vacuum is like $7.99. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes down a little bit more on the big day sale. But yeah, one thing I would like to find, but this is kind of crazy, would be a 2-year smart home compatible gas water heater, which inherently that would be buying a cheap Chinese gas water heater and probably importing it from China, which would be way too heavy. So the next step that's a little less crazy would be to find a gas water heater that can connect to a standard thermostat that then I could plug in a cheap 2-year smart thermostat into, which makes a lot more sense, but I've yet to do enough research on that. Alright, well, this felt like this took forever, but apparently it didn't really take that long, because we've barely gone 2 hours. Yeah, and I've really been lucky to be able to convert these live streams into very consistent, slightly less than 2 hour experiences, not running over. Even when it feels like I'm going to run long, it doesn't seem like that it actually does run long. But yeah, there's just some advantage here. So yeah, as far as Twitter goes, God of War Ragnarok releases on September 19th, and they've put out like specific times explaining the timed launch release window for PC, which yeah, you really don't need to get that specific and spend extra energy animating that. But I guess that's one way to hype things. And then this was the Netflix Tomb Raider series, Legend of Lara Croft, coming October 10th. I have not seen any real fanfare for that at all. And then I'm still debating whether we really need to go through gaming on Linux as a news source, but we'll go through the headlines here. 29 games are getting delisted from Good Old Games. Valve is heading up to PAX Australia for the first time. Maybe they'll announce a Steam Deck being sold in Australia. I don't think you can order it. The Steam client has gotten updated. Funko Fusion for Steam Deck. Support is coming sometime post-launch. Apparently, the Frame of Mind developer ended up coding the game on Steam Deck for a year. If I'm understanding that, he spent a year coding it to get it to run on Steam Deck, is how I'd assume that, what that means. This would have been a repetitive story, but the rest of these stories are fairly new. So as a news source, I don't think I'd get a lot of redundancy. Prime Gaming is giving a lot of games. A lot of them are the Epic Game Store versions, though. Let's see. That's all page 1. Let's go to page 2 and then call it a day. Yeah, we'd already kind of talked about these articles. So 2 days ago. Yep. So it would have just been like one page if I'd gone through all of these stories, which that's not the hugest time commitment. So maybe I will start covering those once I get the new macro finished in its programming. Anyway, speaking of finished, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.